The hum of an airport is the sound of 1,000 different stories, starting and ending. But on a mundane Tuesday at Gate C34, 3 stories were about to collide in a way that would shatter lives, topple a corporate giant, and prove that karma doesn't just knock, it brings a battering ram. For Gate agent Brenda Jenkins, it was about to be the moment her simmering resentment boiled over. For 17-year-old Jackson Strauss, it was the day his passion for music would be mistaken for a threat, and for Phoenix Air, it was the start of an $80 million firestorm ignited by a single, prejudiced phone call. What followed was a masterclass in consequences, a story so packed with drama and poetic justice you'll be questioning every assumption you've ever made. The air in Terminal C of O'Hare International was thick with the familiar cocktail of jet fuel, stale coffee, and low-grade anxiety. For Brenda Jenkins, a senior gate agent for Phoenix Air, it was the smell of stagnation. 10 years she'd been with the airline, and what did she have to show for it? A slightly better vest than the junior agents, and a permanent scowl etched between her eyebrows. Her promotion to gate supervisor had been given to Heather, a woman 5 years her junior, who knew how to laugh at all of Vice President Garrett's terrible jokes. This Tuesday was particularly grating. Her shift started with a dressing down from her manager, Mr. Davies, about boarding time efficiency metrics. Then a passenger had spilled a large soda on the floor by her podium, tutted and walked away, leaving Brenda to clean the sticky mess. Now Flight 712 to Atlanta was delayed by 45 minutes due to air traffic control, and she was the designated punching bag for every inconvenienced traveler. "This is unacceptable," a man in a wrinkled suit barked at her. "I have a connecting flight. Do you people even know how to run an airline?" Brenda forced the plastic smile she had perfected over a decade. "We apologize for the inconvenience, sir. The delay is due to weather patterns over Indianapolis. It's for your safety." He wasn't listening. He was just venting, using her as a human complaint box. She tuned him out, her gaze drifting over the sea of faces in the waiting area. Phones, tablets, screaming toddlers, crumpled snack wrappers. Her eyes snagged on a young man standing off to the side, away from the main crowd. He was a black teenager, probably 16 or 17, tall and lanky. He was wearing a dark grey hoodie, the brand of which she didn't recognize, but it looked expensive, and a pair of high-end noise-cancelling headphones that completely sealed him off from the world. What really drew her eye, however, was his luggage. He had a standard backpack, but his primary carry-on was a sleek black hard-shell case. It looked like professional audio or video equipment, heavy, expensive, and just a fraction too large for the sizer bin. Brenda felt a familiar, unpleasant coil tighten in her gut. It was a feeling she'd never admit to, not even to herself. But it was there, a prickle of suspicion. Where does a kid like that get gear like that? She thought the question forming unbidden. Her mind, soured by years of dealing with chancers and rule-benders, immediately jumped to the worst conclusions. He was probably a SoundCloud rapper, trying to look important, or worse. The case was probably full of stolen electronics. She watched him for a few minutes. He was just bobbing his head slightly to whatever music was blasting in his ears, occasionally tapping a rhythm on the case with his fingers. He seemed completely oblivious to the chaos around him, lost in his own world. To Brenda, this didn't look like innocence. It looked like aloofness, like an arrogant disregard for his surroundings. The delay announcement was updated another 20 minutes. A collective groan went through the gate area. This was her chance. With a renewed sense of purpose, a target for her day's accumulated frustrations, Brenda straightened her vest and marched from behind the podium. She navigated through the grumbling passengers until she stood directly in front of the teenager. He didn't notice her at first. She had to tap him on the shoulder. He jumped, slightly startled, and pulled one side of his headphones off. "Can I help you?" he asked. His voice was polite, quiet. "I'm going to need to see your boarding pass," Brenda said, her tone clipped and official. The boy, Jackson Strauss, fumbled for his phone and pulled up the digital pass. She scanned it. Seat 14A. Everything was in order. "Now your carry-on," she said, gesturing to the black case. "That looks oversized. I'm going to need you to place it in the sizer." Jackson looked from the sizer bin back to his case. "Oh, I've flown with this dozens of times. It's a keyboard, a MIDI controller. It's delicate. It always fits under the seat or in the overhead sideways." Brenda crossed her arms. "Airline policy is airline policy. Every bag must fit within the sizer's dimensions. If it doesn't fit, it has to be checked." "But it's my instrument," Jackson protested, a hint of panic entering his voice. "The baggage handlers will destroy it. It has sensitive electronics. I really can't check it." This was the pushback she expected. The entitlement. "Sir," she said, her voice turning to ice. "Those are the rules. We can gate check it for you and you can pick it up at baggage claim in Atlanta." "No, you don't understand," he pleaded, his voice rising slightly. "This is my final project for my summer music program. It's worth thousands of dollars. I can't risk it." Brenda saw her opening. Thousands of dollars. Her suspicion bloomed into full-blown certainty. There was no way this kid owned anything worth that much. He was either lying or it was stolen. His rising agitation wasn't the panic of a musician. It was the panic of someone being caught. If you can't afford to follow the rules, perhaps you should have chosen a different airline, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Jackson's face flushed with a mixture of anger and humiliation. The passengers nearby were starting to watch, their bored expressions turning curious. Afford. This has nothing to do with affording anything. This is about you being unreasonable. Your sizer is for roller bags. This is a different shape. It fits on the plane, I promise. Are you refusing to comply with a gate agent's instructions? Brenda asked, her voice dangerously low. She was in control now. This boy, with his expensive gear and his attitude, was not going to win. She was going to make an example of him. I'm not refusing. I'm trying to explain. Jackson shot back, his frustration boiling over. Why are you singling me out? I saw a guy walk on with a guitar case bigger than this on the last flight. That's it, Brenda said, a grim smile touching her lips. She held up a hand. Don't move. You're causing a disturbance. She turned on her heel and marched back to her podium, her heart hammering with a vindictive thrill. She picked up the phone, her back to Jackson, and the dozens of watching eyes. She didn't call her manager. She didn't call for a baggage handler. She pressed the speed dial for airport security. This is Brenda Jenkins at Gate C34, Phoenix Air. She said, her voice a carefully modulated performance of distress. I have a hostile passenger here. He's refusing to follow security protocols and is becoming aggressive. I need assistance immediately. She paused, then added the words that would seal her fate. He's carrying a suspicious hard-shell case, and I'm concerned about its contents. The arrival of 2 uniformed airport police officers, Officer Riley and Officer Peterson changed the atmosphere at Gate C34 from one of weary frustration to sharp, anxious tension. The low murmur of conversation died. Passengers who had been idly scrolling on their phones now sat up, their eyes wide, filming the unfolding drama. Jackson Strauss stood frozen, the blood draining from his face. One moment he was arguing about a keyboard, the next he was the center of a security incident. He looked like a deer caught in headlights, his earlier frustration completely replaced by raw fear. Brenda met the officers with a look of practiced gravity. "Thank you for coming so quickly," she said, keeping her voice low, but ensuring the passengers closest to the desk could hear. "This young man," she gestured towards Jackson, refused to have his oversized baggage sized. When I insisted, he became belligerent and aggressive. He made a scene. Officer Riley, a veteran with tired eyes and a calm demeanor, turned his attention to Jackson. "Son, what's going on here?" "Nothing. I didn't." Jackson stammered, his mind racing. "She wanted me to check my keyboard. I just told her it was fragile and that I couldn't. Ms. Jenkins said you were aggressive." Officer Peterson, younger and more rigid, interjected. "I was frustrated," Jackson said, his voice cracking. "I raised my voice maybe, but I wasn't aggressive. I was just trying to protect my instrument." Brenda scoffed audibly. "He was shouting, upsetting the other passengers, and he's being incredibly cagey about what's in this case." She pointed at the black shell, as if it contained a bomb. "He claims it's worth thousands of dollars. Frankly, I have my doubts. The implication hung poisonously in the air. A black kid with a suspicious, expensive-looking case. It was a narrative loaded with prejudice, and Brenda was playing it like a virtuoso. Officer Riley's eyes narrowed slightly. He had seen this play out 100 times. A minor disagreement escalated by someone on a power trip. Still, he had to follow procedure. "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us. We need to have a look inside that case and ask you a few questions away from the gate. Come with you." "But my flight is boarding soon." Jackson's panic was escalating into desperation. "I have to get to Atlanta. I'll miss my presentation." "You should have thought of that before you decided to cause a scene," Brenda said smugly from behind the podium. "I didn't cause a scene." "You did," Jackson yelled finally, losing his composure. "This is insane." "All right, that's enough," Officer Riley said, stepping between them. "Let's go, son. Now." Dejected and utterly humiliated, Jackson nodded. He picked up his backpack and the offending keyboard case. As the two officers flanked him and began walking him away from the gate, a collective gasp went through the waiting passengers. Phones were held high, recording his slow, shameful walk down the terminal. He felt like a criminal. He was just a kid who loved music. How had this happened? They took him to a small, windowless security room nearby. The air was sterile and cold. "All right, son." On the table, Officer Riley said, indicating the keyboard case. With trembling hands, Jackson placed the case on the metal table and undid the latches. He opened the lid to reveal not stolen electronics or contraband, but a pristine Akai MPK-261 MIDI controller keyboard. Its black and white keys, drum pads, and array of knobs and faders were nestled securely in custom-cut foam. Officer Peterson picked up a small laminated card from inside the case. It was a student ID for the prestigious Avedon Summer Music Institute in Atlanta. The name on the ID was Jackson Strauss. "This is you?" Officer Riley asked, looking from the photo to Jackson's face. Jackson nodded numbly. Yes, I'm a student there. The program ends tomorrow with a final showcase. I'm presenting a composition I've been working on all summer. That keyboard, it has all my custom presets saved in it. It's everything. Officer Riley looked at his partner. The aggressive, suspicious individual was just a music student. The story Brenda Jenkins had spun was beginning to fall apart. "Why didn't you just explain this to the gate agent?" Officer Peterson asked, though his tone was less accusatory now. "I tried to." Jackson's voice was filled with exasperation. "I told her it was a fragile instrument for a project. She didn't want to hear it. She just looked at me like I didn't belong there. Like I couldn't possibly own something like this." Officer Riley sighed. He'd heard that before, too. "All right, Jackson. We need to verify this. Do you have a parent or guardian we can call?" Jackson's heart sank even further. His mum. She was going to be so worried, so disappointed. He had one missed call from her already. She was supposed to be landing from her own flight from San Francisco around now to meet him in Atlanta for his showcase. Swallowing his pride, he gave the officer her number. He didn't know it, but he wasn't just calling his mom. He was calling Dr. Penina Strauss, the CEO and founder of Nexus Dynamics, a global data security firm with a valuation in the 12-figure range. A woman who commanded boardrooms with the same effortless authority she used to run her family. A woman who did not suffer fool's incompetence or prejudice. And she was about to find out her son, her only child, had just been detained by the police at the behest of an employee from Phoenix Air, the very airline to which her company paid over $80 million a year in corporate travel fees. The phone call was being made. The pin was being pulled from the grenade. Brenda Jenkins, back at her gate and feeling triumphant, had no idea that the world was about to explode around her. Back at Gate C34, boarding for Flight 712 had finally commenced. Brenda Jenkins was scanning boarding passes with an air of renewed authority. In her mind, she had successfully neutralized a threat, upheld company policy, and put a disrespectful youth in his place. She felt a grim satisfaction. She saw Heather, her rival, watching from the adjacent gate with a look that was a mixture of surprise and envy. See, Brenda thought, I can handle a crisis. This is what a supervisor does. Her manager, Mr. Davies, a mild-mannered man whose primary skill was avoiding conflict, hurried over. Brenda, what in God's name happened? I got a security alert. You called the police on a passenger. I handled it. Frank, Brenda said dismissively. He was a non-compliant passenger creating a disturbance. He was belligerent. He was a teenager, Frank said, his face pale. Legal gets very twitchy when we involve law enforcement with minors. He was a threat, Brenda insisted, lowering her voice. You didn't see the way he was acting, and the case he was carrying. It was suspicious. Before Frank could respond, Brenda's phone rang. It was the security office. This is Jenkins. She listened for a moment, her confident expression slowly dissolving into a frown of confusion. His mother. What does his mother have to do with this? Yes, fine, but is he being charged? No. Fine, I'll wait. She hung up, annoyed. They found nothing in the case. Some kind of music thing. They're releasing him. They want me to wait here with you until his mother arrives to discuss the situation. Unbelievable. The kid gets away with it. Frank Davies looked even more nervous. His mother is here. At the airport. Exactly 20 minutes later, a woman approached Gate C34. She wasn't running or yelling. Her movements were calm, deliberate, and radiated a power that was more potent than any display of anger. She was tall and impeccably dressed in a tailored navy blue pantsuit, her hair pulled back in a sleek bun. Her face was a mask of controlled fury. This was Dr. Penina Strauss. Behind her were Officer Riley and a pale, shaken Jackson, who was clutching his keyboard case like a life raft. Penina Strauss's eyes scanned the gate area and landed on Brenda's name tag. She walked directly to the podium, ignoring everyone else. Her presence was so commanding that the remaining passengers in the boarding line instinctively took a step back. "Are you Brenda Jenkins?" she asked. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the airport noise like a shard of glass. Brenda, momentarily thrown off by the woman's intensity, straightened up. "I am. And you are, I am Dr. Penina Strauss. You have just illegally detained, humiliated, and falsely accused my son." She stated each word a perfectly enunciated indictment. Brenda bristled, her defensiveness kicking in. "Now hold on. Your son was causing a disturbance. He was refusing to follow FAA-mandated baggage policies." Was he? Penina's eyebrow arched. "Officer Riley, would you be so kind as to recount the incident as you understand it?" Officer Riley shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, we responded to a call from Ms. Jenkins about a hostile passenger. We found Jackson here to be cooperative. A search of his belongings revealed a musical instrument which he uses for a school program." "A hostile passenger?" Penina repeated, her gaze locking onto Brenda's. "My son, who has no history of disciplinary action, who is an honor student, was deemed hostile. And on what grounds?" "For questioning your interpretation of a baggage policy." He was yelling. Brenda insisted, her voice getting shrill. "He was being aggressive." "Was he?" Penina asked again, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. "Or was he a young black man with expensive equipment, and you made an assumption? Did you assume he couldn't possibly have earned it? That he must have stolen it? Did you see a threat where a more objective person would have seen a teenager afraid of having his valuable property damaged?" Brenda's face went white. Penina had articulated the ugly thoughts Brenda hadn't even fully admitted to herself. She had laid Brenda's prejudice bare for everyone to see. That's not true," Brenda stammered, but her voice lacked conviction. The passengers still in the area were now openly staring, their sympathies clearly shifted. "I have spoken to 3 other passengers from this gate who witnessed the entire event." Penina continued, her voice relentless. "They will attest that my son was frustrated, but that you were condescending, unprofessional, and the clear escalator of the situation. One of them, a Mr. Peterson in seat 12B, has a full video of your interaction before the police arrived. Would you like me to have him play it for your manager?" Mr. Davies looked like he was about to faint. "Dr. Strauss, on behalf of Phoenix Air. I deeply, deeply apologize for this misunderstanding." Penina held up a single elegant hand, silencing him instantly. "Frank Davies is it, manager? You will have your time to apologize. Right now I am speaking to the employee who chose to profile and persecute a child instead of performing her job." She turned back to Brenda, whose face had crumpled into a mask of fear and dawning comprehension. She had messed with the wrong person, the wrong family. "You didn't see a passenger," Penina said, her voice filled with a cold, righteous anger. "You saw a stereotype. You used your minimal authority not to solve a problem, but to wield power over someone you felt was beneath you. You called the police, weaponizing their presence against my son, putting his safety and indeed his life at risk over a carry-on bag. Penina leaned in closer, her eyes boring into Brenda's. I promise you this, Miss Jenkins. You will remember this day. You will remember my son's face. Because you are about to learn a very thorough, very expensive lesson about consequences. She straightened up and turned to Mr. Davies. My son will not be flying with Phoenix Air. Not today, not ever again. Please arrange for our bags to be removed from the aircraft. I will be booking a private charter. You will be hearing from my legal team. Then she turned to the wider audience, her voice ringing with authority. And as for Phoenix Air, I suggest you get your corporate affairs division on the line. They're about to have a very, very bad day. With that, she placed a protective arm around Jackson's shoulders and guided him away from the gate, leaving a stunned silence and the shattered career of Brenda Jenkins in her wake. The Queen had checked the pawn, and the entire board was about to be overturned. The walk away from Gate C34 was a blur for Jackson. The stares of the other passengers felt like physical blows, but his mother's arm around him was a shield, solid and unwavering. Once they were out of sight of the gate, she guided him to a quiet corner and finally knelt to look him in the eye. The icy fury she had displayed was gone, replaced by a deep maternal concern. Are you okay, baby? She asked, her voice soft. Truly okay, Jackson just nodded, the adrenaline finally giving way to a bone-deep exhaustion. He felt tears welling up and fought them back. I was so scared, Mom. The way she looked at me, the way the cops came. I didn't do anything. I know you didn't, Penina said, pulling him into a fierce hug. You did nothing wrong. This is not on you. This is on her and on a system that allows this to happen. And we are not going to let it stand. She held him for a long moment, then straightened up her composure, returning like a suit of armor. She pulled out her phone. The first call was to the company that managed her private jet charters. Within minutes, a flight to Atlanta was being arranged from the private aviation terminal. The second call was to her executive assistant, Robert Chen. Robert, it's Penina. Her tone was all business now. Cancel my afternoon meetings. I'm in Chicago. There's been an incident involving Jackson. No, he's fine. He's with me. But I need you to do something for me immediately. Pull up our master services agreement with Phoenix Air. There was a pause as Robert, ever efficient, likely typed on his computer thousands of miles away. Okay, Penina, I have it. Go to section 14, Penina instructed. Subsection 7. The clause pertaining to termination for cause, specifically actions by a contracting party that bring disrepute or material harm to the client or its associates. Clause 14.7. Robert confirmed. The reputation and conduct clause. Got it. Good, Penina, said her voice as cold and hard as diamond. I want you to draft a notice of immediate termination of our global contract effective today. Cite that clause. The cause is the discriminatory and dangerous mistreatment of a corporate officer's minor dependent by a Phoenix Air employee, specifically gate agent Brenda Jenkins at O'Hare Airport today. October 17th. I want the draft in my inbox within the hour for my review. And get our legal head, Jonathan, on standby. I want this sent to Phoenix Air's CEO David Miller personally before the end of the business day. Robert was silent for a second, processing the sheer magnitude of the instruction. The Nexus Dynamics contract with Phoenix Air wasn't just for a few executives. It was a comprehensive travel solution for over 5,000 employees across North America, Europe, and Asia. It covered everything from first-class tickets for the C-suite to economy seats for junior engineers. It was worth, conservatively, $80 million a year. "Consider it done, Penina Robert," said his voice level. He knew better than to question her when she used that tone. Meanwhile, back at the gate, Mr. Davies was trying to manage the fallout. He had taken a visibly trembling Brenda into a small office. "What were you thinking, Brenda?" he asked, his voice a mixture of panic and disbelief. "Calling the police, accusing the kid. Do you have any idea who that woman was? How was I supposed to know she was some big-shot CEO?" Brenda shot back, her fear manifesting as defensive anger. He was breaking the rules. I was doing my job. Your job is to de-escalate, Brenda, not to call in a SWAT team over a carry-on. I've seen the video from the passenger. You instigated the whole thing. You were condescending from the first second. Brenda's bravado was crumbling. I thought the case was suspicious. You thought the boy was suspicious. Frank corrected her, hitting the nail on the head. And now God knows what's going to happen. You'll be hearing from my legal team. People like that don't make empty threats. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. You're suspended effective immediately, with pay for now. Go home. Don't talk to anyone. Don't post on social media. Just go. I have to call corporate. Brenda stumbled out of the office in a daze. She collected her belongings from her locker, avoiding the eyes of her colleagues. Heather shot her a look of pure, unadulterated schadenfreude. As Brenda walked through the terminal towards the employee exit, her phone buzzed. It was a notification from a neighborhood social media group. Someone had posted a video. Crazy Karen at O'Hare calls cops on black teen over a keyboard. Her heart stopped. She clicked the link. There she was, her face twisted in an oily sneer pointing at Jackson. The video was shaky, but the audio was clear. Her condescending tone, Jackson's frustrated pleas, her self-righteous pronouncements. The clip was only 2 minutes long, but it was 2 minutes of pure career-ending poison. It already had 1,000 shares. Brenda felt the floor drop out from beneath her. This was bigger than a suspension. This was bigger than an angry mother. This was a public crucifixion, and she was the one who had hammered in the nails. Hundreds of miles away, in the gleaming steel and glass tower that served as the headquarters for Phoenix Air, an email landed in the inbox of CEO David Miller. The subject line was stark notice of immediate termination of global corporate travel agreement, Nexus Dynamics. Miller, a man used to dealing with billion-dollar aircraft deals and union negotiations, read the attached letter. He read it once. Then he read it again, the color draining from his face. $80 million. Gone. Not with 90 days' notice. Not with a chance to renegotiate. Effective immediately. For cause. Because of the actions of a single gate agent at O'Hare. He slammed his hand on his desk, the sound echoing through his cavernous office. He grabbed his phone and yelled at his assistant. Get Garrett from the Chicago hub on the line now and find out everything there is to know about an incident at Gate C34 this afternoon. The tremor had hit. The earthquake was coming. The emergency board meeting at Phoenix Air was convened via video conference less than an hour after David Miller received Penina Strauss's email. The faces on the screen were a gallery of panic and disbelief. There was Garrett, the Chicago hub VP, looking like he'd aged a decade. There was the head of corporate accounts, the chief legal officer, and the head of PR. Let me get this straight. Miller began, his voice dangerously calm. We lost the Nexus Dynamics account. Not to a competitor who undercut us on price. Not because of a fleet issue or a route cancellation. We lost an $80 million annual contract because a gate agent, Brenda Jenkins, got into an argument with a teenager over the size of his carry-on. That's the gist of it, David Garrett said miserably. The teenager in question was the son of Penina Strauss, Nexus's CEO, the son she was meeting in Atlanta for his music recital after flying in from San Francisco on one of our planes in first class. The head of corporate accounts added, twisting the knife. The optics are catastrophic. The head of PR, a woman named Sarah, chimed in. It's worse than just the optics of the contract, David. A video of the initial confrontation is going viral. As of right now, it has over 5 million views across various platforms. The hashtag Phoenix Air Flames Out is trending. We're being accused of systemic racism, of profiling, of endangering a minor. Every major news outlet has picked up the story. Miller felt a surge of white-hot rage. He had spent the last 3 years trying to repair Phoenix Air's public image after a series of embarrassing mechanical failures and a pilot strike. They had just launched a multi-million-dollar advertising campaign centered on family-friendly, inclusive travel. All of that work, all of that money was now turning to ash. What have we done to fix this? Miller demanded. I've tried calling Dr. Strauss personally. 4 times, Garrett said. It goes straight to her assistant, who politely informs me that Dr. Strauss has no interest in speaking with anyone from Phoenix Air, and that all future correspondence should be through her legal counsel. I've drafted a public apology, Sarah, the PR head said quickly. We'll state that we have a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, that the employee has been suspended pending a full investigation, and that we are reaching out to the family to make things right. Miller scoffed. Make things right. Sarah, we are $80 million and a PR nuke past making things right. This isn't about compensation. This is about a statement. Penina Strauss isn't asking for money or an apology. She's taking a wrecking ball to our reputation and our bottom line, and she's doing it to send a message. The company's chief legal officer, a stern man named Paul, finally spoke. From a legal standpoint, our position is weak. Clause 14.7 of their contract is written quite broadly. Her son qualifies as an associate. Ms. Jenkins' actions, especially with the video evidence, could easily be argued as bringing disrepute upon Nexus Dynamics by association. They are within their rights to terminate. Fighting it would be a long, expensive, and very public battle we would almost certainly lose. Miller sank back in his chair, the reality of the situation crashing down on him. They were trapped. They had been completely and utterly outmaneuvered. So what's the plan? He asked the silent faces on his screen. We fire her, Garrett said bluntly. Brenda Jenkins. We make a very public example of her. We announce her termination and mandatory company-wide de-escalation and implicit bias training for all customer-facing employees. We can try to frame this as a rogue employee issue, not a systemic one. It's our only play, Sarah agreed. We cut off the limb to save the body. We issue the statement, announce the training, and pray that this blows over in a week. It won't blow over, Miller said grimly. Penina Strauss just handed our biggest competitor, Ascend Airlines, an $80 million gift. You can bet they'll be issuing a press release by morning about their new partnership with Nexus Dynamics and their commitment to diversity and inclusion. She's not just punishing us, she's rewarding our rival. He was right. The next morning, Ascend Airlines announced a new long-term strategic partnership with Nexus Dynamics, praising Dr. Strauss's unwavering commitment to her principles and outlining a new Passenger Bill of Rights initiative they were co-developing. The move was hailed in the business press as a brilliant piece of corporate maneuvering. Phoenix Air's stock price plummeted by 9% at the opening bell. For David Miller, it was a nightmare. For the board, it was a financial disaster. But for Brenda Jenkins, sitting in her drab, silent apartment and watching her name and face flash across the screen on every news channel, it was the beginning of a free fall into a personal hell from which there would be no escape. The corporate firestorm Penina Strauss had unleashed was about to consume its first and most direct victim. The official termination came via a cold, impersonal email from Phoenix Air's HR department. The subject line was separation of employment. The body of the message was brief, citing gross misconduct and violation of company policies on customer interaction and code of conduct. Her 10 years of service were reduced to 2 sterile sentences. Her health insurance would expire at the end of the month. Her final paycheck would be mailed. Brenda stared at the screen, a hollow feeling spreading through her chest. She had known it was coming, of course. The moment her name became a trending hashtag, her fate was sealed. But the finality of it still felt like a punch to the gut. She was no longer Brenda Jenkins, senior gate agent. She was just Brenda, unemployed, unemployable. Her first instinct was denial, then rage. It wasn't her fault. It was the kid's fault for being provocative. It was his mother's fault for overreacting. It was Mr. Davies's fault for not having her back. It was Phoenix Air's fault for caving to public pressure. She scrolled through the comments on the news articles about her, her fingers shaking. Disgusting racist. Hope she never works again. Imagine being so miserable you bully a kid. This is what privilege looks like. The mom is my hero. Then came the doxing. Someone found her address, her old social media profiles, her phone number. The calls started hateful voices screaming obscenities before she could hang up. Pizzas she didn't order arrived at her door. Her landlord called referencing a clause in her lease about behavior that brings the property into disrepute. He wanted her out at the end of her lease. Her friends grew distant. Calls went to voicemail. Text messages were left on read. The few who did reply offered tepid, uncomfortable sympathy before quickly changing the subject. She was radioactive, and no one wanted to get caught in the fallout. The deepest cut came a week later. She was mindlessly scrolling through Instagram when a photo popped up on her feed. It was Heather, her former rival, standing in front of the Phoenix Air check-in counter, beaming. The caption read, "So thrilled to announce my promotion to gate supervisor for Terminal C. Hard work pays off. Blessed at new beginnings." Brenda threw her phone across the room where it hit the wall and clattered to the floor, the screen shattering. Heather had gotten the job that should have been hers. She had gotten it because Brenda had self-destructed. Days blurred into a monotonous cycle of fear and self-pity. She stopped answering the phone, kept her blinds drawn. Her savings, never substantial, began to dwindle at an alarming rate. She applied for other jobs. Customer service roles at other airlines for tail positions. Administrative assistant jobs. She never heard back. She suspected her name was now on an informal industry blacklist. Or maybe a quick Google search was all it took for a potential employer to see the video and hit delete on her application. One rainy afternoon, about a month after the incident, She found herself at a low-end grocery store, carefully calculating the cost of pasta and canned sauce. As she stood in line, a mother and her teenage son were in front of her. The boy was excitedly showing his mom a new app on his phone that let him create music beats. He was animated, his eyes bright with passion. The mother listened patiently, a proud smile on her face. Something inside Brenda cracked. For the first time, she didn't see a provocative youth or a disrespectful kid. She just saw a boy and his mom. She saw the same light in his eyes that was probably in Jackson Strauss's when he talked about his music. She thought about the panic she must have caused him, the terror of being led away by police officers in front of hundreds of people. She thought about the righteous protective fury in Penina Strauss's eyes, a mother defending her child. It wasn't about a keyboard case. It was never about the case. It was about her. Her bitterness, her resentment, her feeling of powerlessness. She had seen a kid who seemed to have more than she did, expensive headphones, expensive gear, a sense of self-possession, and she had wanted to knock him down a peg. She had used the color of his skin as an excuse, a shortcut for her own simmering prejudices to come to the surface and justify her anger. The realization offered no comfort. It was a cold, sharp stone in her gut. There was no one else to blame. She had done this to herself. The lost job. The public shame, the lonely apartment. It was all a direct consequence of a single, ugly decision she had made on a Tuesday afternoon. Her money eventually ran out. She lost her apartment and had to move into a tiny, run-down room she rented weekly. Her first job was washing dishes at a 24-hour diner, the smell of grease clinging to her clothes and hair. Her hands, once accustomed to tapping on a computer keyboard and scanning boarding passes, were now perpetually raw and chapped from the hot, soapy water. One evening during her break, she stood in the alley behind the diner watching the planes fly overhead on their approach to O'Hare. She could see the distinctive blue and orange tail of a Phoenix Air jet. It looked like a visitor from another life, a life where she had a career, a decent apartment, a future. A life she had thrown away because she chose cruelty over kindness, suspicion over empathy. The karma hadn't just been a single event. It was a cascade, washing away every part of her old life and leaving her stranded in the wreckage. 6 months later, the world had moved on, as it always does. The hashtag #PhoenixAirFlamesOut was a digital fossil buried under layers of newer, more immediate outrages. Public memory is a fickle and fleeting thing, but for the 3 individuals at the center of that Tuesday afternoon storm, the event was not a forgotten headline. It was a fixed point in time from which the entire trajectory of their lives had been irrevocably altered. Jackson Strauss stood on the polished wooden stage of the Avedon Music Institute's grand concert hall. The warmth of the stage lights felt like a spotlight of pure vindication on his face. In the cavernous dark beyond the stage, a sold-out audience sat in a profound, anticipatory silence. This wasn't the summer showcase he had almost missed, but a more prestigious winter concert for honored alumni and rising stars. He adjusted the microphone, his hands steady, and looked down at the familiar black and white keys of his Akai MPK-261, the very instrument that had been the catalyst for everything. For a fleeting second, the memory of Gate C34 flashed through his mind, not as a trauma, but as a source code. He remembered the cold condescension in Brenda's voice, the sterile chime of the boarding announcement, the sickening lurch in his stomach when the police officers approached. He remembered the sea of faces, some hostile, some indifferent, all watching. He had been a powerless object of suspicion then. But here on this stage, he was the conductor. He held all the power. He could make them feel what he felt. He took a deep breath, and his fingers found their place on the keys. "This piece," he said, his voice clear and confident, amplified throughout the hall, "is a composition I wrote about an experience I had. It's about how the most ordinary places can become arenas of conflict and how sound and memory are tied together. It's called Gate C34. A quiet murmur rippled through the audience. Then silence. He began to play. The opening notes were jarring, built from digitally sampled airport sounds he had meticulously collected. The sterile three-note chime of a gate announcement became a recurring, anxious motif. The distant bass-heavy roar of a jet engine provided a bed of ominous tension. He wove in the tense, indecipherable murmur of a crowd, creating a soundscape that was immediately recognizable, yet deeply unsettling. Upon this foundation, he layered a haunting, complex piano melody. It began with hesitant, fearful notes that seemed to stumble over one another, conveying his stammering panic. As the piece progressed, the melody grew stronger, more defiant. The electronic drum pads erupted in a syncopated, angry rhythm, mirroring his frustrated heartbeat. The composition was a narrative anxiety, giving way to humiliation, then to a slow, burning anger, and finally blooming into a powerful, soaring crescendo of vindication and release. He had taken the ugliest day of his young life and transmuted it into breathtaking, resonant art. When the final sustained chord faded into silence, the auditorium was utterly still for a full 3 seconds. Then it exploded. The applause was a tidal wave, a roar of a standing ovation that washed over him, wiping away the last vestiges of his humiliation. He looked out into the crowd, and his eyes found his mother's in the front row. She was on her feet, clapping tears of pure, unadulterated pride streaming down her face. The look they shared was one of profound understanding. He had not only survived, he had triumphed. The story of the airport incident, circulated by a music blog that had interviewed him about the composition's origins, had caught the attention of the industry. Tonight, a senior A&R representative from Interscope Records was in the audience, and he was already scribbling notes, a deeply impressed look on his face. Dr. Penina Strauss watched her son take his bow, her heart swelling with a love so fierce it almost hurt. Her actions in the aftermath of the incident had never been about simple revenge. They were about protecting her child and the principle that no child should be subjected to such treatment. The $80 million contract was not a cudgel of anger, but a lever of change. She had moved the entirety of Nexus Dynamics' global travel account to Ascend Airlines, but the deal came with unprecedented conditions. In a conference room a month earlier, she had personally overseen the final demonstration of the Meridian Protocol, the training module she had forced Ascend to co-develop. Using cutting-edge VR technology, the program immersed employees in realistic branching narrative scenarios. They had to navigate situations as a gate agent dealing with a non-native English speaker, a flight attendant calming an autistic child, or a check-in clerk facing a passenger with an oversized case for a priceless cello. The program measured their physiological responses, heart rate, vocal tone, and provided instant feedback on de-escalation empathy and implicit bias recognition. It was revolutionary. After a glowing feature in the Wall Street Journal, other Fortune 500 companies, and even the Transportation Security Administration, TSA, had begun inquiring about licensing the technology. Penina had not just punished one airline for its failure. She had created a new industry standard for success. For Phoenix Air, the fallout was a long, slow bleed. Their stock price eventually stabilized, but their brand reputation was in tatters. Consumer sentiment scores plummeted. They lost 2 other major corporate accounts in the months that followed, with the CEOs privately citing the Nexus Dynamics debacle as a brand alignment issue. The company poured tens of millions of dollars into a mandatory company-wide training program, a rushed inferior copy of the very concepts Penina Strauss was perfecting with their rival, and launched a cringe-worthy "We're Listening" ad campaign, featuring smiling, diverse actors. It did little to staunch the bleeding. In the cutthroat airline industry, they were wounded, and the sharks were circling. Vice President Garrett was quietly and publicly reassigned to a less prominent post in Brussels, a classic corporate execution. In a move of cynical irony, the meek Mr. Davies was promoted to his position, seen by the board as a safe, unimaginative choice who would never make waves, and in a grey industrial suburb, 20 miles from the O'Hare runways, Brenda Jenkins pulled on a pair of fingerless work gloves and clocked in for her night shift. The air in the massive warehouse fulfillment center was thick with the smell of cardboard and conveyor belt lubricant. The cavernous space echoed with the constant beeping of scanners and the rumble of machinery, a cacophony that had replaced the orderly hum of the airport terminal. Her job was mind-numbingly simple. Pick up a package from a chute scan, its barcode, with a handheld device, and place it on the correct conveyor belt. 8 hours a night. A headset blasted robotic instructions into her ear, leaving no room for thought. The bitterness and rage she had felt in the beginning had long since been eroded by exhaustion and a profound, hollow resignation. She was a ghost in a high-visibility vest, her face anonymous among hundreds of others. One night, a familiar box came down her chute. It was a standard overnight envelope, but the shipping label bore the crisp blue logo of Ascend Airlines. The recipient address was for the Nexus Dynamics corporate headquarters. Her scanner beeped. She felt a familiar dull ache in her chest, a phantom limb of a life she once had. She placed the package on the belt and watched it glide away, just one of tens of thousands that would pass through her hands that night. She was no longer a person who made decisions. She was a cog in a machine, a human extension of the conveyor belt. She had learned her lesson about consequences, not in a single fiery explosion, but in this slow, grinding, anonymous existence. She had learned that a single moment of casual prejudice, a single act of petty cruelty could create ripples that grew into tidal waves, washing away one life while launching others onto entirely new, unforeseen shores. She was the living testament, the quiet, ignored proof that karma, when it finally arrives, adly announces itself with thunder. It simply presents its bill and collects its devastating, inescapable debts with interest day after day. The story of Brenda Jenkins, Jackson Strauss, and Phoenix Air is a stark reminder of how interconnected our world truly is. A moment of prejudice at a gate in Chicago didn't just impact a teenager. It sent shockwaves through the stock market, reshaped corporate policies, and ultimately redefined the lives of everyone involved. It forces us to ask ourselves some tough questions. Was the airline's $80 million loss a just punishment for the actions of one employee? Did Brenda's personal ruin fit the crime? Or was she a scapegoat for a larger systemic issue? And what responsibility do powerful companies have to wield their influence for positive change, as Dr. Penina Strauss did? These aren't easy questions, and the answers are rarely black and white. What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story of drama power and hard-hitting karma resonated with you, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who appreciates a story that makes you think. And most importantly, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next deep dive into a story you won't be able to forget. Thanks for listening.